Stories come to life as we follow up on our alumni and friends who have been featured in CSUN Today.
I'd like to welcome you all to the HHD Stories Come to Life, where we follow up on stories that have been written about our alumni and friends of CSUN and CSUN Today. This series is brought to you by the Reputation Pillar Committee from the College of Health and Human Development. That's part of our strategic planning action. We've formulated committees, and this is one of them. So today we have with us the department chair, Mechelle from Department of Recreation and Tourism Management, and our guest is alum, Mr. Lee Zeidman. Mr. Zeidman is president of the Staples Center, the Microsoft Theatre, and LA Live. So I'm sure you all know about those things. Dr. Best is chair of the Department of Recreation and Tourism Management, where Lee earned his degree. So let's just get a little background on this. In December 2020, CSUN Today featured Mr. Zeidman following his professional experience over the pandemic year, but it started out at the beginning of the year in January. And as you know, that was marked by the tragic death of Kobe Bryant and his daughter Gianna and seven other people in a horrific helicopter crash. The Grammys were also scheduled at that event for that same evening, and it was held at the Staples Center. But the community decided that they wanted to use it as a place to pay their respects to Kobe, and the complex reality of what was going on certainly became, part of the new media that we know of today. And Mr. Zeidman advised staff to let it grow organically. He says, listen, the Grammys paid tribute, and the center would later host a formal memorial service to Kobe and his family and those of the others lost in the helicopter crash. So as you can see, all of this is going on. Then on top of that, we have the COVID crisis, which causes the complete shutdown of everything. And Mr. Zeidman worked very carefully to keep the venue staff afloat and the complex venues that he has, and through all kinds of unpredictable precedents, ultimately working toward reopening, which we finally see that's part of what's happening. So that's where we are today. So Dr. Mechelle Best, the chair of the department, will be talking with Mr. Zeidman about what has transpired since then as stories come to life in health and human development. Dr. Best?
Thank you, Dean Webb. And Lee, thank you so much for being with us today. We are really excited to bring your stories to life. I'm going to start by asking Lee some questions, and then at the end of our relatively short conversation, we're going to open it up to the audience to get some questions. So whoever's in the audience, feel free to type your questions into the chat, and we're going to get to those in a few minutes. So let's start with Lee. So much has happened since our CSUN Today stories came out. We had a story in 2014. Our most recent one was in December of 2020, and we're curious about how things are going at the Staples Center, Microsoft Theatre, at LA Live, and so on. But first, before we get to what's happening right now and what you project for the future, we just want to know, how did you identify the critical ways that the Staples Center could help out and still be open for business during the pandemic?
Well, thank you very much for having me today. I'm very appreciative of the invite. First and foremost, we actually had to work with the Department of Public Health, LA County's Department of Public Health, because we had to educate them on how our industry worked. Live entertainment, mass gatherings were the first to close, and we're pretty much the last to reopen again, as you can see what's going on in and around the country. So the county was very concerned, as they should have been, with keeping the infection rates down, lowering the curve, making sure the hospitals were not inundated with COVID patients back then, and that the healthcare workers, the first responders, were protected. So we needed to educate them on how our industry actually worked and how we could be able to assist them in writing guidelines and protocols that would allow people to come back for mass gatherings. Because at that point, there were no mass gatherings. We had, various lockdowns. We had various protocols that were put upon us. And at times, people couldn't even leave their homes until they needed, supplies, things of that nature, or medical appointments, things of that nature as well. So we had to first and foremost educate everybody. And then once we did that, we had to do a top to bottom A to Z evaluation of the venue that would allow us to determine what we could do to make our venues safe to welcome the public back when we were allowed to welcome the public back.
And I know you welcome the public back in different ways, not just for major events happening at the Staples Center that we're accustomed to, like your entertainment shows and your basketball teams and so on. What other ways did you utilize the Staples Center that we weren't expected? We weren't accustomed to seeing the Staples Center in such a role.
Well, we did two things, actually. We became a major polling site. We did a partnership with the Registrar's Office for the County of Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Lakers, the Los Angeles Kings, the Los Angeles Sparks, and we became a polling site for 11 days. We're very proud of the fact that we allowed people in and around downtown to come down and cast their vote during the 2020 election. Throughout the pandemic, we have opened up our campus, our site, to be various forms of test sites, vaccination sites as it related to some of the events we were doing here. And what people really don't understand is that, during this entire pandemic, we actually hosted 130 events throughout 2020. There were some events that took place without fans, some events that took place with limited capacities. And then June 15th, when the governor reopened up the state, we were allowed to host full capacities. And so we have been doing events throughout the entire pandemic, including hosting major award shows as well. But I think prior to bringing back fans, we're most proud of the fact that we actually served as a voting center.
Thank you. How do you feel the Staples Center complex is doing now, given what we've been through in the last 18 months or so? And what do you think the world of entertainment is going to be like going forward?
Well, I mean, you can just watch NFL football on Sunday and you can think that the world of entertainment going forward, nothing has changed, because you can see 75,000 people at a football game, none of them wearing masks, which is concerning for somebody such as myself. And then there are protocols different for indoor venues such as Staples Center and Microsoft Theatre, and outdoor venues such as Dodger Stadium or SoFi Stadium or the Rose Bowl or the Coliseum. That said, we're emerging slowly, I still believe, coming out of the pandemic. If you just were paying attention, you could have read that California has the lowest infection rate in the country right now. While that's a great metric, that concerns me as well, because that may mean that people will become complacent again. And we can't have complicity, because we need people to continue to put those needles in the arms so we can get to herd immunity, so we can get rid of masking, we can get rid of vaccination checks, we can get rid of testing, we can get rid of a lot of those things. Moving forward, I will say that LA Live, the entire complex, I have 17 restaurants here that report into us. We were probably 6 short throughout the pandemic as it relates to restaurants going out of business. We now are down to just 2. We have 2 spaces, and we're continually to show them to potential restaurateurs. So we feel very comfortable about that. The month of October is going to increase tremendously the amount of activity on the campus. Staples Center is his own self will host 24 events in the month of October by its own right. And then Microsoft Theatre will host about 15 events. The Novo will host about 20 events. So we're coming back here. But that said, again, we will require vaccination proof or proof of a negative test 72 hours coming into the venue, and a photo ID coming down to the complex to attend a Laker game, a Clipper game, a concert, those type of things coming up. So slowly but surely we're coming back. But again, we need people to be diligent. We need you to wear your mask when you're in the venue and you're not eating and drinking. And we need people to continue to put needles in their arms and get vaccinated.
So thank you, Lee. In the last few months, in the last year and a half, as events have come back, and even before events started to come back, I'm sure there were a number of changes that the Staples Center, Microsoft Theatre, LA Life had to make their spaces more welcoming to the public, to keep us informed and so on. What are some of the technologies that you may have changed to make this a lot easier for your organization? And do you see some of those technologies still being important as we go forward?
Very good question. And it's a question that comes to mind to a lot of people that are going to be coming to our venues. like I said, we did an A to Z, top to bottom audit of the venue. We looked at everything that you could potentially touch, and we made it contactless. Going into our restrooms, from the flush valves to the paper towel dispensers, to the faucets, to the soap dispensers. We took out everything that you could potentially touch. Because you have to remember, in the very beginning, this pandemic's only 19 months old. And in the very beginning, you know, people were instructed to wash their groceries, to wipe off boxes that were delivered to your homes. So we went with a global biorisk accreditation firm that actually took a look at all of our sanitation, disinfectant, and cleaning processes and policies here. And we got a certification, which is a good housekeeping seal of approval as it relates to how we disinfect, clean Staples Center. We took all the contactless functions out of the building. We went cashless, we went smokeless, we digitalized all ticketing, we digitalized menu ordering from standpoint of going to our concession stands. So anything and everything that we could take away a touch point, we did that moving forward. All those things are here to stay. And we're not the only venue that did that. Venues across the country have done those all throughout the entire 19-month pandemic now. And I believe that all these things are going to be here to stay. We just accelerated everything that people were moving towards moving forward, like ticketing, like instead of bellying up to a concession stand, you can mobile order now. You can still belly up, but you can mobile order, or you can go to a kiosk. So there are tremendous amount of things that you can now do in our venue that you don't have to touch, or we've taken out those touch points moving forward.
Okay, so thank you for all of that information. That's really given us some insight in what's been happening with the Staples Center, LA Live, and so on in the last couple of months. I just want to turn our conversation a little bit to higher education and the education and experience you had in the RTM department, which was probably leisure studies or leisure and recreation when you did your degree with us, and how your days at CSUN helped to prepare you for the position of president of the Staples Center, LA Live, Microsoft Theatre that you currently have.
Well, you know, the funny thing is, and just to harken back to my career, I did 5 years of psychology. So I had a BA in psychology from Cal State Northridge, which based on my grades allowed me to really do nothing. I was never going to get into a graduate school, and I was working at a bowling center in Simi Valley at that time, and I was trying to figure out what the heck am I going to do? And back then, there were not any kind of sports management programs that you see that have sprung up on colleges and universities throughout the country. So I walked over to the recreation department and I asked them, you know, what is it can I do? I'm not ready to leave CSUN. I'm not ready to go out into the world with a degree of psychology that wasn't going to allow me to really do anything pertinent. And so Dr. Jack Foley, you may recall his name, he passed away a few years back, kind of took me under his wing, and we created a program for me. And so I was in the leisure studies sort of department for commercial recreation, and I would be, you know, handing out backpacks, tents, of those type of things, and really wasn't what I wanted to do. And I asked Dr. Foley, I said, what else can I do? What else can I do as it relates to commercial recreation, ski resorts, bowling centers, things of that nature that allow me to develop a career? And they said, well, we have an on-campus pub. Would you be interested in booking the entertainment there? And I said, I've never booked live entertainment before, but you know what? I'm ready to give this a shot. And so we built a Wednesday Night Live program out of it, where we booked rock and roll bands, and the students came to it. It took off. From Wednesday Night Live, we did Tuesday Night Jazz, we did Thursday Night Comedy, we did Monday Night Football, and then we rested on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So, and then from that, I actually created my first position. My first job was working for Cal State Northridge in the Student Center. And I was the advisor to what was called SPACE then, which was the on-campus programming group. And at that point, all I wanted to do for my entire career was run a student center. So what did I learn? I learned how the attention to detail. I learned how to ask questions to not only my peers, but the students as well, but to the higher ups in education. You know, not only from my professors, but to the management staff that oversaw the university center. And once I did that, I decided that I need to do more informational interviews if I'm going to go anywhere else. So I started to put myself out there as it related to my career growth. And then once I started getting other positions within other universities, I decided that it was time to become a sponge. and suck up as much information as I could possibly do wherever I went for an information interview or wherever I went for a new position or a new job. And I worked for 3 universities prior to getting into the private sector. I worked for Cal State Northridge, I worked for UCLA, and I worked for UC Santa Barbara. And my goal back then was to work for a university the rest of my life. I felt very comfortable on a college campus. As most of you who work there, the students stay the same age. We just age a year each year that goes by. And my goal was to run a student center. Unfortunately, that didn't happen at ASUCLA. I was selected to run a 6,000 seat event center and operations for the university center at UC Santa Barbara. And so that kind of got myself going into the facility management. But I will tell you this, it was Northridge that actually got me started in this business. It was Northridge that I learned attention to detail. It was Cal State Northridge that I learned how to ask those questions and become a sponge that propelled me into my first professional job in the private sector was director of operations at the Forum. I was there 10 years, and now I've been at Staples Center LA Live for 24 years. I was the first person hired for Staples Center.
As the dean, I'm just going to say, here. Thank you so much for that, because it's amazing to have people say that what they learned at school made a difference in their careers. And the 3 things you picked were spot on. So thank you so much for that.
I used to tell people that I have a BA in psychology, a BS in commercial recreation, and I have a master's in intramurals because I was never ready to leave. And so I continued to play intramurals as I got those 2 degrees. And I'm quite proud of the fact that I spent 9 years at Cal State Northridge, and I think it shaped who I am today and propelled me to not only working for 2 other universities, but got me prepared for the private sector.
There's so many gems in what you said. I especially like the need to put yourself out there and connect with people, talking to people at all levels, from the bottom of the rung all the way up to the top, becoming a sponge, soaking up information, learning everything you can learn, and really paying attention to detail. And those are some critical areas that we try to encourage and to grow in our students as well. Now, I want to turn to questions from the audience. We have a few questions in the chat, so I am going to start off with a question from Mitch Levine, who says he was a student with you in the recreation department. He wants to know if you went back for your master's degree, and is there anything hurtful about having done a degree in recreation management? Because there's some who found it difficult to get jobs in the private sector after graduating with such a degree.
Well, I think first and foremost, I decided that after 9 years and then working at 2 universities after that, I didn't feel the need for an advanced degree. And I didn't feel the need for a sports management degree because my entire time at Northridge and then subsequently at UCLA and UC Santa Barbara, I wanted to be in a university setting. So I didn't think I needed to do anything more as it related to that, because that's where my goals brought me, and that's what I wanted to do. Unfortunately, I didn't stay working for the university sector, and I moved to the private sector. At that point, I realized that, and this is the way I hire people as well, I didn't need an advanced degree. What I needed was the experience.
Okay. I'm not seeing other questions in the chat right now, so I'm just going to keep asking you questions of my own. Another thing that came through from what you said is that just because you start in place A, it doesn't mean place A is where you're going to end, but that there were certainly some transferable skills that you picked up initially and along the way that helped you to move into different places. And I wonder if you could talk about some of those skills with our audience to help them understand that a degree doesn't mean you end up in a fixed location and in a fixed position. I think we lost Lee there for a minute. Dean Webb, you're muted.
I was going to say, I think you're absolutely right. And what he was saying, this is the message I got from Lee, was that it doesn't matter where you start. It matters if you have goals. It matters if you work hard, if you pay attention to detail. and if you are willing to put yourself out there. I just love hearing him say that, because I think too many people think there's a one-to-one between getting a degree and what happens in your life. That may happen in some areas,
I'm back.
but it doesn't happen. Oh, great, he's back. Okay, so, but I'm just thrilled with that. He's right here. Well, you can't see him, but
Well, I think you were asking me. Well, I forgot what you were. Listen, I don't remember last night's score, let alone what you were asking.
you're not alone.
Go ahead and react.
I was asking about the skills that are transferable across jobs. So you start in position A, you end up in position Y, or you start at company A, you end up at company Z. But so the degree that you get, even though it has a good foundation, doesn't mean that you're going to stay in one spot and in one position. So what would you share about that?
I agree with you. I try to, when I come back and speak at universities or classes or things of that nature, I try to tell people to listen, are going to end up. There are a tremendous amount of opportunities in that. What you need to do is you need to get that first position, get your foot in the door, and then become that sponge. Because if you're working for a company that's anything like ours, we promote from within, and it will allow you to advance. And so I'm a big proponent of informational interviews. Get your resumes out to anybody and everybody. Do your research. Understand who leads that organization.
We lost the last bit of what you said, and this of course just points to the concern with technology and how when it works it's fabulous, when it doesn't work you have some issues, but it sounds like you were saying really prepare yourself, really research the organization that you're going to be interviewing with and so on, know who the key players in that organization are and the kinds of things that they do and what the organization does. So prepare yourself, do the research when you're looking at job prospects with a company.
Exactly. And then again, once you get in, learn as much as you can about that operation or that organization, which would allow you to be promoted from within.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question that's really biased to my department. We know that your broader field it's recreation on a large scale. There's a lot of entertainment and so on. But I'd like to know he's frozen again, but when he comes back, maybe he'll hear this. I'd like to know what Lee does to relax, because I know he works from like 5:30 in the morning till about 7:30 or 8:30 at night. So Lee, I'm wondering what you do to relax. Do you participate in any kind of outdoor recreation activities?
Play a lot of sports, a lot of softball, a lot of those type of things. Now, when you get hurt at age 66, it's not an ice pack anymore. It's like a major surgery. So I'm trying to cut back from that. But this in recreation and in my profession, it's a social life as well. And I love sports and entertainment. So I follow sports and entertainment. And so
Okay, we are just around 3:25, and we know that this conversation is supposed to end at 3:30. So if Lee is able to pop back in, we will hear some wrap up from Lee. Lee, we missed the last part of what you said, but we know that you really love sports and you engage in sports as much as you can. So it's not just a job, it's something that you enjoy outside of work as well. So if you want to share a few thoughts with us to wrap up, please feel free to do that. And then we will hear a final set of closing remarks from Dean Webb.
Can you hear me now?
We can, yes.
All right. Yes, technology is, in the last 19 months, I never took a Zoom call or a Microsoft Teams call until then. And now here we are doing this.
Dean Webb?
I'm here. Even though Lee's not here, I want to say, if you look at his picture, the word in the back of that thing says, relax. And I think that is really probably the best piece of advice that anybody can give people. No matter what you do, you have to learn how to relax. You have to learn how to ease yourself into situations and ease yourself out of those tense situations. But at the same time, learn your lessons from those things, keep a focus. This is what Lee's been saying. I love this man. I love what he's saying. It's just so spot on. And it's really important because that's how you build success, you know, one brick at a time. And you got to know what to do with it. So I want to thank you all for joining us today. We'll be sending you a follow-up email and a link to the recording so you can have the recording if you would like. But I really want to thank Lee for talking to us today. Dr. Bess, you were fantastic. This has really made his story come alive in ways that you could never get from reading it off a page. So, or as much as we might find technology somewhat problematic, the idea that we can share Lee with the rest of the world at the same time and not have to all come to one place is a fantastic thing. So I'm going to applaud technology. I'm going to applaud you, Lee Zeidman, for all that you have done, and you, Dr. Bess, for being a fantastic person and a great host to this event. Thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at our next series when we have it. That'll be next month. I don't know who the guest will be, but we'll look forward to seeing you there as well. Thank you again, both of you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dean Webb. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you all.